Good morning. Bear with me just a couple minutes. I'm gonna let some other people log in. Trying to get some music playing without violating any copyright. Give it a couple minutes, guys. For how long? I know, Nina. Was it last week I had the Pikachu shirt on, and now I have a Beatles shirt on. So I tell you, I am a man of many interests. Miss you too, Beth. Next week's Easter, so I have to pick a special shirt out to wear for Easter. Wish I had like one that had a crazy look. Yeah, that's it. Travis, that's what I'll do. Next week I'll wear a sports coat on top of a U2 shirt, maybe. Hey Travis, I have a question. When the SEYC live stuff starts tomorrow, is it going to be live or is it just playing videos of in the past? I didn't get a new suit. I might have a crazy coat that I can wear. Surprise. A shirt that says I'm the pastor. I said so. Yeah. I saw one that said something like I have tattoos and yes, I'm a pastor or something like that. I still get asked that. People, they say you're a pastor and then they look down and stare at my arms. So, yeah, guess you can call me that. I'll show them the back of my arm where it says pastor. That's in Greek, so I just have to take my word for it. Alright, so we need to get started. Let me get this music. Oh, get a copyright deal. You know, I actually had, speaking of the YouTube copyrights, I actually had one of my videos got taken off a few years ago. We were doing streaming from church, and it was, I had the video, I had it recording, and in the background, I mean, you could barely hear it, but in the background was just music playing off my iPhone, and they sent me an email, you know, saying that the video had, I'm like, really? You could barely even hear it. I mean, literally, you could barely hear in the background this music, but they, I had to delete it off of YouTube. I thought that was the craziest thing. All because it was barely in the background. I mean, literally, you had to turn the volume all the way up to hear it. And I guess that's what they do. Or somebody complained about it or somebody. So anyway, good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. I'm sure we'll have a few more people log in. That's fine. Most of the people go back and watch this later, so that's it's not a problem. I enjoy doing it live instead of just recording it, because at least I can see, as I do this, I can see people that log in. I can see your messages. It's a lot different when you're standing here just recording something to upload. So it is a crazy time. I've talked about last couple of weeks that it's such an interesting time that we live in. Of course, since the last time we were on here, now the state of Alabama has a stay-at-home order. I guess it went into effect yesterday evening at 5, so that makes it even more interesting, and kind of goes along with what I said last week about when Amy was talking, that, you know, it's almost like God is using this to kind of force families to stay together, and I believe it's true. I think you'll see two things come whenever we get beyond this. I think you'll see, of course, everything's going to be different. I believe that the country and the world will never go back to being the same again. Now, whether that's a good thing or bad thing, just depends on what areas change. But I think we'll see two things come after this. I think we'll see a huge baby boom, and you know, kind of like after the blizzard in '93. But you'll see a huge baby boom, and you'll probably, unfortunately, see a lot of divorces come from this, and that's what's sad, because when you're forcing these families to stay together and they're not used to that, and maybe their relationship is better in their mind when they're both at work, or one of them's at work, and they're not around each other all the time, then all of a sudden you're forcing each other to be, you know, you're forcing everyone to be close to each other. And I think you'll see, and that's sad, and I hope I'm wrong, but I do believe you will see that, and it's just now beginning. I mean, we have at least the whole month of April, and I believe it will continue on to that. By the way, Jeff Baxter just messaged me and said it's not coming through on Facebook. Are you guys seeing it? I know it keeps saying people are seeing it, but are you guys seeing the video or hearing me? Or I think it's just going to be something on his end, because I have it pulled up. Okay, now it says he's watching, so that's good. It is a crazy time. Next week it looks like we'll be doing Easter service from, the comfort of my front yard, and that's, hey, we do what we can. At least in 2020, we have this capabilities. You can imagine doing this when I was young. I mean, there would be no way. I mean, you would have to do it over the phone, or I'd have to send letters to everyone to get a message out. But here in 2020, it's a wonderful thing that we have, so we can communicate with each other live, and we can upload videos and stuff like that. So it's awesome to be able to have that. I mean, of course, I'd rather be doing this, in a church or somewhere where we could all see each other in person, but it is what it is, and we make the most of it, right? So I've talked the last couple of weeks, of course, all dealing with the panic, kind of the attitude that as believers we should have during this time, and hopefully gave you a little bit that you can apply as far as encouraging not only yourself, but encouraging others that you do talk to or get within 6 feet of, to get through this crazy time. And what I wanted to talk today is about faith, because I believe that the last couple of weeks, even though I went through some things and mentioned faith, I believe it's important for us to understand how faith is supposed to drive us. How important is, as a Christian, how important is a faithful life? And we know that there's several verses, and I want to mention the first one's Matthew 17:20. Matthew 17:20 says, "He replied, because you have so little faith, truly I tell you," and of course it's Jesus, "if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you." And looking at that, taking that verse and looking at it with what we're going through now. Now, when I was young and I would hear this verse and this teaching of faith can move mountains, and of course that's what it's saying here is you tell, through faith, you tell the mountain to move and it will move. There's nothing impossible when you have this life of faith. And I used to think when I was little, well, how's that possible? Because there's mountains that you can say, okay, mountain, I want you to move, get out of my way. And then, of course, it's not going to move. I can assure you that any of you go and you tell a mountain, whether it's Cheehaw or a real mountain, go out to Colorado or somewhere like that, and you stand there and stare at that mountain, you say, I would like it to move on this side of the city or this side of the town, it's not going to happen. So we look at it and apply it into what our life is. And I want to start by saying a mountain can be so many different things in your life. I mean, you need to fill in the blanks of what a mountain is. A mountain can be a relationship issue. A mountain can be a financial issue. A mountain can be a health issue like we're kind of faced with now. A mountain can be really any trial that's going on, any tough trial or trying time that's going on in your life. I want you to substitute in Matthew 17:20 the word mountain with whatever's going on in your life. And I know every single one of you, not just counting this COVID-19 deal, but I know every single one of you have things that are mountains in your life. And if you look at that verse again in Matthew 17:20 and you replace mountain with that situation, and I'll say marriage, I'll use marriage as an example. So you could say, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, move from here. If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this situation in your marriage, this separation or whatever it is, move from here. and it will move. Nothing is impossible. So you see how you can look at every area of your life that's trying and a tough situation, and use that idea of this mountain, this verse, and apply it to that. It's saying have faith and live through faith. So we look at that and we say, okay, well, how do we get faith? Well, Romans 10:17, of course, tells us faith comes from hearing and hearing the word of Christ. I love the NIV translation there. I believe it says faith comes from hearing the message of Christ. And I love that because, it is a message to us. It is a message to us still in 2020, and it's what we're to apply. So we know that how do we get stronger in our faith? Well, this tells us that faith becomes stronger in our life by studying His Word, by reading His Word, by hearing His Word. However you take in His Word is how we grow in our faith. So you can take it in by sitting here listening to me or someone else. You can take it in on Sundays when we're able to get back to church service, or Wednesday nights, or reading a devotion, or hopefully studying the Bible on your own. You should do that every day, or however you breathe it in. And then what happens, the more you breathe in of God's Word or God's message, the more you're going to start exhaling. The more you inhale, the more you exhale. And that's the way a Christian life is supposed to work. So you take in word after word dealing with, say, a marriage situation, or you take in word after word on dealing with pandemics or dealing with any crisis in your life. And when you take that in, the more you take that in, then naturally you're going to start exhaling that. And the whole idea is to get where you don't even think about it. It just does it. It's a natural process for a Christian. It should become part of your routine. You breathe in God's Word, you breathe out. It's, if you can look at it in talking about the human body, the more oxygen you breathe in, eventually you have to breathe out. You can sit there and suck air in as much as you can, but once your lungs are full and they reach this maximum capacity, they're gonna breathe out. You're going to naturally breathe out. That's why someone told me one time years ago, as little kids, you may threaten parents and hold your breath. If you haven't done that, I'm sure you've seen people do. You see it do on TV as well. But you just hold your breath when you get mad at your parents, and that's it. You're going to hold your breath, and your face may turn red. The body will create, eventually your body will cause you to breathe out. You can't hold your breath until you die. I mean, it's not possible. It's not medically possible. People say, well, what about underwater? Well, what gets you underwater is you hold your breath, and eventually you've got to breathe again. And when you do, that's when you take in water. So think of that in the Christian life. Again, Romans 10:17 says faith comes by hearing the word of Christ. So when you breathe in, the more you breathe in of God's word, the more you take in, again, whether it's watching things like this, or whether it's sitting in church somewhere, or whether it's sitting at a Bible study or small group, or studying on your own, the more you get in, the natural response is going to be eventually you have to breathe that out. And that should be the faith process. That should be how we walk, we live our life. 2 Corinthians 5:7 says, for we walk by faith, not by sight. Again, I believe it's the NIV translation, says, for we live by faith. The word walk in the Greek, it actually means to live. So it's telling us we should live every aspect, every second, every area of our life should be lived through this faith walk, this faith process, this faith cycle where we take in God's word and we apply it in our life. We take it in, we breathe it in, we breathe it out. We breathe it in and breathe it out. And that's every situation. Look at Paul. I talked a little bit about Paul last week or the week before, and I talked about how he was, nearing death, and he was talking about how he was, constantly being monitored by guards. Well, looking at history and the way they would treat these type of prisoners is they would actually chain them to a guard on either side. They were chained to a Praetorian guard, which was kind of the elite of the elite. The Praetorian guards were, if you look at it nowadays, it would be kind of like if you took Secret Service and combined it with like Delta Force or Navy SEAL, and these guys were bad dudes. They were elite. And he was chained to these Praetorian guards, and what they would do is the chain was like 6 feet. It was a 6-foot area. And I taught a lesson one time, and those that are online right now that have been with me, they've heard me teach this maybe a couple times, I think. But I taught a thing talking about who's on the end of your chain. And what Paul did when he was faced with this terrible situation, he had so much of God's word that he had breathed in, he had taken in throughout his ministry, that it was a natural thing to, even in a situation where he was chained to these Praetorian guards, where a lot of people would just cower down and scream and cry and beg, he was breathing out God's word. He was breathing out what his lungs had been full of for so long. So in this trying situation, he looked at who was on the end of these chains, and he would constantly preach God's word to them. Of course, gospel was always priority, and it should be priority in your life. The gospel should be the fact that Christ died for you, was buried, and 3 days later rose from the dead. And we'll go into a lot of that next week, breaking down the gospel and making sure you fully understand what the true gospel is, the complete gospel, death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ for you. So he would do that, and he would constantly preach. And from what we've learned throughout studying Paul's life is a lot of them wouldn't return. They were on duty. This was their duty while they were at work, was to be chained to this guy that was constantly preaching God's word. Now, some of them hated it, but a lot of them, it reached them, and it made them understand that what they were doing, imprisoning this man for preaching truth, was wrong. So a lot of them, from what I've learned studying, is a lot of them wouldn't even return. They would just, they weren't going to go and be a part of this. And that was, he continued to do that. He looked at his situation as not a terrible, trying disaster. A poor, pitiful me, what am I going to do? But instead he looked at it and said, okay, who is on the end of my chain today? Who is at the end of this 6 feet? And it's funny because 6 feet is our social distancing. But you look at who is at the end of that 6 feet. Who can I breathe out what I've taken in? And that's what Paul did. He took a bad situation that most people thought was terrible and there was no way out. And he said, you know what? No matter where I'm at, whether I'm laying on a beach or whether I'm chained to Praetorian guards, I'm going to preach truth. I'm going to breathe God's word out and make an impact for Jesus. And that's the way we should look at it. So again, I taught these lessons on who's at the end of your chain. So I encourage you during this time, and even beyond this, every day, look at who is in your 6 feet. Who is around you? Who do you come in contact with? Now, not only it starts, of course, within the walls of your own home. A lot of you, I assume, are essential workers. So a lot of you are still dealing with coworkers and customers or patients. A lot of you are still dealing with those. So every day you look at, how can I breathe God's word out? And people say, allowed to talk about and preach Jesus at my work. Well, first of all, that's not what God says. And second is, a lot of it is, like I said last week, you can have a humongous impact through your actions. Breathing God's word out is not just through your mouth and through your voice, but breathing God's word out is through your life. Remember, again, 2 Corinthians 5:7 says, for we walk by faith, not by sight, or we live by faith, not by sight. So it doesn't just say, for we speak by faith and not by sight. It says, for we live this way. So your actions can breathe out just as much, and sometimes even more of an impact to others around you than your words can. So you need to make sure you're practicing that. And again, the only way you can do it, Romans 10:17, is hearing God's message or God's word, the message of Christ, is taking it in so that your spiritual lungs are reach this capacity, so that the natural response is to breathe it out, is to show others this faithful lifestyle. Then that brings us what we're going through now and what Paul was going through when he was in prison. As we look at the area we're in, and I mentioned this earlier, this is a trial. This is a trying time. And it takes me to James chapter 1, verse 2 through 4, and I'll read it and then I'll kind of break it down for you. But it says, "Consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance, and let endurance have its perfect result, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing." So looking at what we've talked about and how we get faith, how we are to live by faith. Now, how do we approach faith in a situation like this where we're faced with a trial? It says, "Consider it all joy." Now, I've taught this many times from my church and at Bible studies through the 20-something years that I've done ministry. And I've taught this and looked at, well, consider it all joy. What exactly? I mean, I've had people say, how am I supposed to be happy about when I lose a loved one? How am I supposed to be happy about when I'm diagnosed with some life-threatening illness? How am I supposed to be happy when I've lost my job? How am I supposed to be happy when my wife or my husband has left me? How am I supposed to be happy? And the list goes on and on and on. How am I supposed to find joy in this? Here's the thing, and I want you to understand this, and this may be different than what you've ever thought, but oh well. So consider it all joy is not finding joy in what you're going through. It's like I tell my congregation a lot, you would be strange if you found joy in the fact that you're going through a trial. You would be unusual if you lost a loved one, someone you cared about, and you got excited and found joy in that. You would be unusual if you lose your job during this COVID-19 pandemic and you said, "Yes, I'm so joyous that I lost my job. I cannot wait to not have the money to put food on the table. I cannot wait to not have the money to pay the power bill." Or, the list goes on. That's weird. I mean, I find so much joy in the fact that I've been diagnosed with this terminal illness. That's strange, and that's not what it's saying. So where do we find our joy? Notice again when I read it, and I'll explain it to you. It says, "Consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials." Here's where we find our joy. It's the light at the end of the tunnel when we apply faith. No, it says, "Consider it all joy," and then it says, "when you encounter these trials." But here's where our joy is. Knowing that the testing of your faith produces what? Endurance or perseverance. It produces endurance. It gives you this stamina in this breathing in and breathing out. And I'll explain that in a second. It says, "Let your endurance..." Do this when you build your endurance up, then it's going to have its perfect result. And so that you may be what? Perfect and complete. You're whole, you're mature, you're growing spiritually, lacking in nothing. So again, going back to what I was talking about, how the faith process your work, when we breathe God's word in, naturally when our lungs reach capacity, we breathe out. And that's the way we live by faith. This produces endurance. And if you think about a marathon runner, which it blows my mind how marathon runners do what they do. But think about that. You can't, of course not me, I can't just go out and say, you know what, tomorrow I'm going to run a marathon. I just feel like running a marathon. I would die. I mean, literally, I would collapse. I would make it maybe a mile. Probably wouldn't even make it a mile. I'd make it like 100 yards. But the point is, I have no endurance when it comes to that. My breathing, my lungs aren't strengthened. My muscles are a whole another topic. But the main thing is my lungs wouldn't be able to handle that. My heart wouldn't be able to handle that. I have no endurance when it comes to running like that. So therefore, what do? I train. I go out and I start out maybe with a mile, and then I do that for so long, and then once my body adjusts to that, then I go and up it, a few miles, 5 miles, and then keep working up until I have built this strength, this endurance, this stamina to go and run a marathon. And when I run the marathon, it's going to feel a whole lot different than it did months and months ago, or for me, years and years ago, to get to that point. Now, looking at where we find our joy, again, it says, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. So looking at the Christian life, all right, so we're faced with these trials. These trials pop up in our life. Again, we're going through one all together right now. We go through a lot of individual trials. This is one that we're all faced with at this moment, but we go through health trials. We go through marital trials. We go through relationships in general, trials and things like that. So when we go through these trials, when we apply faith, when we walk by faith, remember 2 Corinthians 5:7, when we walk by faith or we live by faith, then this applying during these trials is building up endurance. It's building strength. We're growing. Our lungs are getting stronger. Our muscles are getting stronger. All these things are getting stronger. And of course, spiritually speaking, our spiritual lungs are getting stronger. Our spiritual muscles are getting stronger, to where this becomes such a routine for us. Now, when you get to that point, again, you don't find the joy in the running of the marathon. I've never heard any marathon runner that halfway through the marathon just says, wow, I tell you, this is so joyous. What is their joy? The joy is the finish line. It is a big deal to finish a marathon. It's a big deal to finish. To win it is humongous, but the whole idea is to finish the race. It's to get everybody that finishes a marathon is a winner. I mean, they finished a marathon. That is an impressive thing. It doesn't matter how long it takes you. It's finishing the marathon is unbelievable, of course, without cheating. But that's the joy. The joy is keeping your eye on the prize. The joy comes in knowing that the finish line is gonna be there, and I'll get there, and I've done it. It's this accomplishment that you have. Of completing it. So again, applying it in terms, looking at it in biblical terms, is when we breathe in God's word, we breathe it out, we continue to do our best to live by faith and grow spiritually, then we are growing our muscles, our spiritual lungs are getting stronger and stronger. Then when we're faced with things like this COVID-19 or any of the things I listed, or whatever your mountain is in your life, then we're faced with those. Our joy is not in going through that, but our joy is if I keep the faith, if I remain strong in my faith and continue to live and apply God's word that I breathed in, I continue to breathe it out, then my joy comes on the other side. My joy comes when I complete this trial. Just like, again, a marathon runner, my joy is when I finish that marathon, not in the middle of the marathon. It's knowing what the end is, and that's perfection and completion in the Christian life. That's maturity. That's spiritual maturity, and we grow and we become stronger. I believe Christians, after this COVID-19, I believe a lot of Christians will be stronger from this, and I believe it's because we are forced now. We're put in a situation where our faith is being tested. And do we panic? Do we live in fear? Do we separate ourselves from our families because we can't stand to be around them? Or do we grow closer to our families? Do we instead of applying fear to the situation, do we apply faith to the situation? And so I believe a lot of Christians will come out of this a lot stronger. That's where our joy is. Our joy is seeing what God will do in our lives and the lives of Christians around us and the lives of the country, people in the country and the world, our joy comes in seeing that at the end, the finish line at the end. So that's how this process all should go. It should be able to be a natural thing, and we have to take times like this. Look, we have a lot of free time now. You cannot say that you don't have a lot of free time, and I know there's a lot of essential workers that don't, and I understand that, but for the most part, even the essential workers have more time, independent time, and time with families or whoever lives with you more than ever right now, because our entertainment avenues have been halted, and I think that's a very important thing. Before, you would get home and you would immediately start thinking about, okay, how can I entertain myself? How can I entertain someone? How can I do that? Well, now you're kind of forced not to be able to buy into worldly entertainment. I'm not saying it's all wrong. I'm not one of those guys that says, oh, this. Look, the point is, we've put, like I said last week, entertainment in this country above taking in God's word. We have put entertainment, worldly entertainment, above anything to do with taking in God's word. How do I know that's true? Well, the people that miss church or Bible study or studying on their own, however you do it, that miss that due to worldly entertaining things. I mean, I said last week that baseball practice, when I was little, I played baseball, of course, for years. When I was little, you knew that you didn't have baseball practice on Wednesday night. You knew that you had no game on Wednesday night. You knew that you had absolutely nothing on Sundays. Those were church days. Those were days to spend with family. Those were days to, the holy days, which, call it what you want. But we knew that. Society bought into that. Society understood that. Well, now in 2020, it's not that way. It's just another day to most people. So therefore, we are constantly replacing taking in God's word with taking in worldly entertainment. And so I believe after this whole pandemic is over with, I believe we'll be stronger, and we should be stronger, because we've been put in a situation where the entertainment, for the most part, has been halted. And we need to entertain by taking in God's word. We need to entertain by praying more. We need to entertain by breathing out God's word to people that are in our immediate family, or people that we come in contact with at work. Again, if you're an essential worker, or people we come in contact with on social media. This should be a time to do that. And again, what is the end result? Well, the more we do that, then the stronger we become in our faith, the more endurance is built in our spiritual life, the more mature we become. That's growth. And then it becomes a easier race when we are faced with future trials and future crises and future pandemics. It becomes an easier race for us to run. And our joy, again, comes not during the trial, it comes at the end. It comes knowing that there is an end to this, knowing that when I get through this, if I keep living and applying and walking by faith, if I keep doing that, I know that I will grow from this. And we all want growth. It's, looking at, again, biblically speaking, a lot of mention in Hebrews. Of course, the author of Hebrews wrote a lot about it. But when we're in our Christian life, every area of our Christian life, whatever it is that we're to apply, you can hear a lawnmower, sorry about that. But every area that we're to apply God's word in our Christian life, we start out in that area as babies. We start out as babies and we drink milk. Just like if you look at a little baby, a newborn baby, they drink milk. I mean, you can't give a newborn baby steak. And you give a newborn baby steak, they will choke on it. Well, in the Christian life, it's the same way. In an area that we are to apply God's word to, and this is every single area. This is marital, this is relationships, this is job situations, this is crisis that we're going through, whatever the area is, you start out in that area as a baby. And you need milk. You need basic truths. You need God's word in a basic form. And the more you take that in, the more that milk turns to smashed peas and carrots. The more that you take in that smashed peas and carrots, then those turn to softer foods, but not quite steak. More solid foods, I should say, and not quite steak. And then your goal is to reach up to where you're eating hamburgers and steaks, or if you don't eat meat, you're eating whatever you eat. I don't know what vegans and all that eat, but something that would choke a younger person. So you get to that point, and that builds strength. When you take that stuff in, you grow. Your body grows. Next thing you know, you're 6 feet tall, or however tall you are, and you're stronger. You can lift more. You can run faster. You can do all these things better. Well, in the Christian world, that's what we do. We take in milk, at a basic level. Then the more we take that in, then we move up to the smashed peas and carrots, and we work our way up to a little bit more solid, and then eventually we get to we're taking God's word in on a platter that's got steak and potatoes and whatever. It's making me hungry this early in the morning. I want steak now. But you take that in, and that's how we grow, and that's how we become complete in areas of our Christian life. The Christian life is built up of different levels and areas. It's not all just you apply one thing to everything. It's every area there's messages from God that we're able to apply to that area. And you don't know what they are unless you take His word in. And again, the more you take in, the more natural response is going to be to let it out. That's what our goal is. So during this time, again, I've mentioned a lot of stuff over the last couple of weeks, little pointers on how you can get through this, how you can find encouragement during this time, how you can encourage others. But today, I want to leave you with this. If you've listened, some of you have been logged on the whole time, some of you haven't. Of course, this will be archived, so I encourage you to watch it. But the whole nutshell of this, again, is the importance of taking in God's word to grow in our faith in order to breathe that word out to others around us, and therefore they breathe it out to others around them, and it spreads. Just like the COVID-19 spreads and it's so contagious, God's word is even more contagious than that. And we do that it starts with us. It starts with you. It's not me speaking for you. It starts with you in your personal life, your personal relationship with Jesus Christ as a child of God. So your personal relationship is where it begins. Again, you don't have to be this different person. You don't have to be all uppity and dress a certain way. Again, remember, I'm the guy that people say, you're a pastor, and they stare at my tattoos. You can be who you are, but I promise you, the more you breathe in of God's word as a Christian, you will desire to be more Christ-like. You will desire to grow closer to Him. You will desire to take in more and more. I tell people, and I've started with doing team Bible studies years ago, and I used to always say, and I still say it today, even to adults, I say 10 minutes. Because a lot of people, one of the number one reasons for people nowadays not studying God's word is, well, I don't have the time. So I ask people, I say, well, how much time do you spend on Facebook? How much time do you spend on Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, YouTube? How much time do you spend watching your favorite television shows, binge watching them? How much time do you spend going to the gym? How much time do you spend as a bumblebee about tax me? How much time do you spend working in the yard? Me, not much. How much time do you spend swimming or going to the beach or this or that? And I say, so you're telling me that the number one reason that you don't breathe in God's word is because of a time thing. Okay. Instead, it's really a priority thing. If they're honest, the reason you don't take in God's word is your priorities are all screwed up. That's the reality of it. So I tell people, look, 10 minutes a day. You can find 10 minutes in a day, every single day, to take God's word in. And I've taught that for years and said that for years. And people say, well, Jeff, why do you only say 10 minutes? We should give God a lot more than 10 minutes. Here's why. I understand that, but here's why. Because if you do it right, if you breathe God's word, literally applying everything that I've talked about today, if you breathe God's word in literally for 10 minutes, then that 10 minutes will grow to 20 minutes. That 20 minutes will grow to 45 minutes. That 45 minutes will grow to an hour, and so on and so on. And your soul, your lungs, because remember, the more conditioned you get, the more you want to breathe in and fill your lungs so you can breathe it out. So that 10 minutes, if you do it right and you're truly studying God's word with the intention of growing spiritually and learning about how to live your Christian life and then praying, then the more you do that, that 10 minutes, the next thing you know will be hours. And you'll have such a desire to take that in and take it in. So when I say 10 minutes, give God 10 minutes of your time in a day. I mean, 24 hours. You can find 10 minutes. That I don't really mean to keep it at 10 minutes. I don't want to see a believer that's been a believer for 20 years and they're still saying, yep, I still do my Bible study 10 minutes a day. Shame on you. The whole idea of 10 minutes is to give you the starting place. And again, if done correctly, you will want more. Your soul will crave more the more it grows. It's like the chips. You can't just eat one. I forget what chips it is, but they talk about you can't eat just one. When I was younger, I would try that. When I'd hear the commercial, I'd eat one. And literally, it's like, because I know that the commercial says you can't just eat one, my body was craving a second, a third.